Or being gifted.
It's the tea stream. We have a lot of tea. This is all decaf tea, and yet we still get like a little giggly high off of it.
Well, because we get giggly high off of each other all the time, but usually there's a date line and time zones in between us.
I know.
And now we're actually proximal.
It's weird.
As opposed to like occurring at the same moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are my shitty glasses, but hey.
I approve of your shitty glasses.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm still in my pajamas, so.
I'm not wearing pants.
Yeah. I'm wearing no pants approved bifurcated garments.
Mine are actually no pants approved bifurcated garments as well. And that is a whole thing. And so, yeah, Jennifer's here.
Yeah, I've been here like a while.
So streaming is happening.
We enjoy it.
And the way that I did this, you know what you could do? You could say, hey, Katie's on her page. The way that I'm streaming now, you can actually see people can post comments.
Okay, well, let me just put it on the, you know what, I'll tell our pod.
Tell everybody. Anyway, so we were talking. Talking happens.
Ancestors don't like my computer.
And we were talking about what it's like to be gifted.
Yeah, we were talking about all the, you know, kind of, I guess you could say like the like we feel like being gifted is a good thing. At least I feel that way. I can't speak for you. I feel like it's a good thing. But
you mean like, well, I can't speak to like a child's experience. No, I can speak to my child experience.
I would say that for me, like being gifted in the big general sense, I really value that I'm gifted. I think it's cool.
Yes.
But
wait, does that make us like
arrogant?
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing is like that's the thing. Like my childhood experience, and I think a lot of people's experience of being gifted is that you're bad and wrong because you're different, or weird is a very common,
or like better.
Right. Because people think that you think you're better, even though gifted people tend to be more egalitarian than average. So we don't actually think that we're better. We just understand that we're different and that those differences are okay. And that's the common mental state, I would say, that among gifted people, that's also been studied, that's how gifted people commonly describe.
And so, so Jennifer and I were talking about educational experiences when we were younger and how different they were.
Yeah.
In that my giftedness was cultivated and encouraged, and I was streamed in a way, and yours was not.
Yeah, I would say that like in my family life, because it's turtles all the way down, it's like a lot of gifted people all around. Like we're just normal, and it's normal to not fit in at school.
Her father is one of 4 on the planet who does what he does, by the way.
Yeah.
At the level he does. And he's super cool. And you should meet him sometime.
Okay.
Mom is awesome as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And both are gifted. And so that's just how we are. Like, this is how we are, and people will accept us or not accept us, and that's just life. And that school is unlikely to meet our intellectual needs or our emotional or social needs. Is also a common narrative that has been handed down through the generations. Fascinatingly, part of the reason why I homeschool is because the school was unable, but also unwilling to even provide a baseline adequate education to my gifted son. So I was like, I felt sometimes very unhappy in school. And I could see that the experience that I had, which has some traumas in it, was going to be repeated. And that's been repeated generation after generation, right? In a way, an institutionalized generational trauma. And so I decided, why does my son have to go through that?
And then here's the Zitterbard experience. The Katie and the David, who are both gifted. And my parents are teachers, or were teachers. They're dead, so they're past teachers.
They're doing something else now.
They are. But the whole, like, the performative aspect of being gifted, and here I'm speaking about like testing high, like having a high IQ.
Yeah, the actual
reading early,
diagnostic giftedness.
you know, having multiple talents or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But
the
I was
overexcitabilities.
I'm not overexcited. I don't know what you're talking about. But I was born into like the stew I was born into,
right.
specifically like is about that. My father was a professor at Carnegie Mellon in the music department. Both of my parents classical musicians. Me, piano's cool. Go learn classical piano, and while you're at it, blah blah blah, you know, and all that. And so it was always okay. Of course, I never played anything, like had like sports fun, and then we were talking about that. Nobody told me not to do sports. Nobody said it outright, but I saw my mother break a finger and she couldn't play the piano for a while. And I thought, oh, I can't do anything that might. So no skiing, no basketball, no team sports, none of that.
Yeah.
You know, perform. And oh, by the way, get the lead, because I'll give you what you want. I may not be authentic in it.
Right.
And then I placed out of my freshman year at Carnegie Mellon.
Sometimes not the best thing. And that's one of the things when I talk to a lot of parents of gifted kids who are homeschooling their gifted kids, including by profoundly gifted, which are the ones who have a really extreme difference between their age and maturity levels and their intellectual capacity, is that a lot of times, you know, you want to indulge the intellectual capacity. So you might have an 11 or a 12-year-old who's ready for sort of college level coursework, and a lot of
still 11 or 12.
They're still 12, and like they're still immature. And that's great. My recommendation to those parents is like, chill out. Like, you know, don't skip the first year of college. Like, actually. And it's not say hold them back. It's actually like, remember that there are massive skill deficits. And if we send them to, you know, Carnegie Mellon at age 12, for example, not that was your experience, but like if that is what happened, if that's where they're going, it's like you have to also create space and opportunity for the other needs of the child, because what will happen is they'll end up unbalanced and confused in adulthood.
And the other thing is my lack of me lacking doing these things is not my parents holding me back from them.
No.
It was me wanting to, I just wanted to dance. I wanted to sing. I wanted to play. That's what I wanted to do. Yeah. But I also then never learned how to collaborate in certain ways. Yeah. I never learned how to be coached in certain ways. I mean, I was coached in other ways.
Right. Yeah.
I never learned how to not know.
The discomfort of learning without ease. That's a big thing that a lot of gifted people have to figure out.
I test horribly. Like my SAT. I was also stoned when I took my SAT.
Well, aside from being stoned, most gifted people don't test well, because if you have a true-false test, we can argue how both are true and false. So we're like, how do you answer it? And essay tests. Gifted people tend to do better with essay tests, which is part of it. And the other thing is whole-on learning is a tough one for younger kids. Where
gifted here in the like measurable academic sense, not necessarily in the everybody has something to offer.
Yeah, and
because what about the people who have wonderful things to offer who don't fit into that mold?
Which is totally fine. It's not.
How does that? I mean, that gifted. No, do you know what I'm like?
Yeah, so that's a language problem, and that's a language problem that a lot of gifted advocates are talking about. They're like, and this is the thing too, we gifted people did not choose the term gifted. Okay, that was chosen by somebody else a long fucking time ago, and it's just been the term. And so it's like when people say, "Oh, you think it's gifted?" It's like, no, that's the diagnosis that was given the label.
And it's a diagnosis.
It's a diagnosis.
Well, look at us getting all upset and agitated.
But it's a diagnosis, and that is different than being gifted as a human being, which everybody is, because they have inherent human dignity and gifts to bring forward to the human population.
And then how do we as a society, and including me, without a husband, wife, or child, create space for that to come forward? And that's one of the places where I go to being gifted and emotionally mature,
Mm.
because I am both.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, even though I have my moments,
Yeah, well,
then that's kind of privilege.
Yeah.
And so my job is to use that
Mm.
to the benefit
Yeah.
of
And that's
all, not just.
Yeah, and one of the things that's
I
interesting.
mean, shit, if you guys.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things too about gifted people and neurodivergent people, actually, as well, autistic people, a lot of people with the whole ADHD and that spectrum, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia,
synesthesia.
Yep.
Sensory processing disorder.
Processing, all of that is of the same neurodivergent family.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, if you're one, you have one or more of the others, which makes you often just more sensitive. And that sensitivity actually lends itself into this huge, these really interesting places of egalitarianism. And so a lot of times in that egalitarianism, it's like what other people are foisting upon us as a hierarchy, like, oh, you think you're better than us or whatever, you're not better than us. That hierarchical thinking is not in our way of being.
It's just kind of where we get put.
Yeah. And so we, in general, the egalitarian notion of children in a classroom setting who are gifted, it's really, really challenged because the classroom is very hierarchical, and particularly at the childhood level. And the hierarchy is an adult hierarchy because there's the hierarchy of the adults at the school, right? The principals and the assistant principals, the teachers, the assistant teachers, the adult helpers in the room. Those are the sort of top tier. And then the bottom tier are, the popular kids that the adults like, the second tier popular kids that the adults like.
And that was your experience.
Yeah, and I was at the bottom. I was at the adults don't, not that they don't like me, but I was challenging to them because what my teacher explained to me, we actually brought the prop.
I know, but now it's not high enough, so I'm going to go lower.
I can use it.
Oh, you can.
I can use it like this. I know, it's amazing. So could you move that so there's no water on it? I don't want to hurt it. So the prop that my teacher gave me at the time is, she was like, here's the thing that's hard about gifted people. Camera's over here. Here's the thing that's hard about gifted people or gifted children. And she's like, the average person in a day takes in and processes about that much information. So not much, right? It's not saying that people are stupid. It's just saying that that's how much.
Is the most.
That's the most that it's like
the bell curve.
Yeah, they have the bell curve. And so at the height of the bell curve is, the max amount of information the average person can take in. And that information is academic, right? So it's intellectual, it's emotional, social, vibes. Is it a vibe? Are they feeling the vibe?
Mm-hmm.
So all of those elements are in there. Now, the other thing she said that's tough is she's like, the emotional stuff is the hydrogen atoms.
Okay.
Right?
So H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen.
1 oxygen. And she's like, the intellectual stuff is the oxygen.
Oh, okay. So for young people.
Separate them.
Most of.
Point out which ones are the hydrogen and which ones are the oxygen. She's like, and then here's the gifted person. She's like, gifted people have different amounts. But she's like, there's the gifted person.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, depending upon their individual, what we now call overexcitabilities, determines how much hydrogen and oxygen they've taken in.
Mm-hmm. And
she's like, and then how fast they process it is part of it as well. She's like, so some people that could take, the average amount, which was like, say, halfway, that would be as much as they can intake and process in a given day. And processing includes going out for recess, drawing pictures, having lunchtime. She's like, processing.
Here's an argument for keeping the arts in school.
Absolutely. We need to keep the arts in school, and we need to keep the sports in school. We need to keep the outside time in school. Absolutely. But she's like, the other side of it then is that now you've got a gifted person. Now, sometimes this amount of information can be processed in the amount of time that the average person needs. So there's 2 things that are often in the diagnosis, which is what you can understand and how fast you can understand it. And yeah.
So you're not necessarily, because it's not like you're necessary. So there's a velocity factor.
There's a velocity factor. So there are people who are neurotypical who have high velocity. So they can take in more information simply because they can process more information more quickly. There are people who are gifted who need more time to process because they have a different processing speed. So when they do the diagnostics, when the educational psychologist does the diagnostics, they test where you can go, how far up you can go sort of intellectually, which, by the way, does have race, gender, class issues. Okay, there are race, gender, class issues in the testing. There are biases in the testing. And who gets tested? Massive. We can talk about that another time. But they do that. And then they also do the processing speed.
Mm-hmm.
And that processing speed is a huge part of it. So you can have a person with, who's extremely high intelligence in that overexcitability, but their processing speed is more normal. So they can take in a lot, but it takes them a while to chunk it out into what it is, which is a really cool thing. So yeah, and that makes it, that's where we have all these variances in giftedness. And then there's the other thing that's really cool, which is what?
Well, it just occurred to me
Yes.
that some of the slower learning or the lower learning measures assume that level of people can take in this much in this amount of time. And if a person can take in that much and takes more time,
yes,
they might be held back.
Slow learners. Yeah, but they often aren't, and that's the thing.
It just takes time, even I would imagine context.
Yeah, it does take.
If
context.
There's a lot of stimulation, if there's, I sat on my desk in third grade because sitting on the chair I couldn't do. Like I literally couldn't.
Yeah.
So they just put me in the back of the room and sat me on my desk. But if I was in a public school, I would likely have been labeled problematic behaviorally.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, and those are the huge issues of race, gender, and class as well, because we have, what we see is that when Black children are giftedly disruptive, which gifted kids are naturally disruptive because they're outside of the normal curve, they become, they're oppositional defiant disorder, which, by the way, people are saying, scientists are saying, may not actually exist because it's very, very contained.
Kind of like borderline personality disorder?
They're like, it's a really weird diagnosis, and it doesn't actually function as a diagnosis because it's not like an inheritance. They're like, you put a kid in a hierarchical space where there's injustice, and they go, blah, it's injustice, and they misbehave because they're like, this is fucked up. Clearly. So, they like to label that. And then that goes straight into that prison pipeline. And so it's like, but white kids and particularly white boys are tested. Oh, he must be gifted, and also because of privilege, there's access to testing is easier and things like that.
And because of privilege, there's access to context. Like you can put your kid in a place where they will be cultivated or put in the correct soil to grow. Yeah, and these are the hardships of all of these sort of intersections in race, gender, and class and giftedness, is that we have a lot of people through the generations who are undiagnosed gifted people, and they have often been shamed to the point of not understanding that they're gifted, or they're just bad, and that increases anxiety. They don't know what's right. They don't know how to behave properly. And that when you discover that I might be gifted, or some of my friends have discovered from these conversations, like, I think I might be an autistic woman. Oh, wait, autistic women exist? I know. And it turns out, and sometimes you can be like, it's amazing. You can be gifted and Black. Who knew, right? And yet it's, and that's the kind of stuff that is really, really vital in having the kind of conversations about how this neurodivergence exists in autistic people and gifted people. There's a lot of synergy in those two groups, and ADHD and all that stuff, because people need to be liberated from the sort of social shaming that comes around neurodivergence. Not knowing that you're neurodivergent and that you've just been told you're bad and you're misbehaving, and you're doing bad things and you're a bad person, and what have you. And it's like, as soon as you sort of, for myself, I was really liberated when I finally started telling people I value my intelligence. Because people would, particularly on the internet, there's wrong views. Catherine just noticed that I was telling someone on the internet that they were wrong. I always I read it. Oh, somebody was wrong on the internet. And it was a white man. So it was one of those things where
I was like, you know, in general, I share my point of view, which comes from being gifted and from my intellect. One of my overexcitabilities is intellect. And also it's psychomotor. I don't know if you've noticed that we are psychomotor people.
Oh my gosh, my right leg has just been like because of the other thing.
Yeah. And so that's like why the dance is so important, or sport, or playing outside. And because that's how we process through our whole nervous system. And by the way, everybody does that, but we do it more. It's just more. Everything's just fucking more. So yeah, when I started telling people, when they would say, oh, you think you're so smart, I'd be like, you know what? My so smart is something I value about myself. And that was me really embracing and actually being vocal about myself. Like, because I was taught, you know, you're taught by the baby Jesus, the brown Jesus.
Brown baby
by
Jesus.
The brown baby Jesus, you were taught not to put your gifts, your light, under a bushel basket. Because if you put your light, your candle, under a bushel basket, the basket lights on fire and burns down your house. But also, that was my thought on it anyway. And
I was raised by heathens.
Right. But the woman who used to say, she was a beautiful Black woman who helped me with all kinds of things. She's like, don't put your gifts under a bushel basket. I was like, right, because it'll burn down your house. She laughed. She's like, that's a gifted person, honey, seeing that metaphor a completely different way. But the same thing is that like I was hiding myself and I was hiding my giftedness because I was continually told in the public sphere that like my giftedness was wrong. It was okay at home, right? It was okay at home, but it was safe at home, but it was not safe out in the world to be out in this way.
Motherfucker, man. And like, talk about privilege in my household of origin then, huh?
Well, yeah, and the fact that you were able to be performative with it. Like you were like, get on the stage and be gifted. And I was like, go into the closet and don't tell anyone that you're gifted. It's amazing the difference.
But yeah, there's a big but in there.
Yeah. Oh, I like big butts. I cannot.
No, but and it's a but that bubble.
Yeah. I'll drink some of my knowledge.
Well, by the time I was in high school, though, so like younger, I would there was a smorgasbord of skin tone, of heritage.
Well, you went to school with that amazing Billy Porter guy, right?
I did. I went to high school with him. He stole our high school show from me.
Well,
but anyway,
he can't help it.
I did a strict tease in it, though.
That's hard to overshadow.
It's okay.
But you know.
But in high school, yeah, we did. And so I went from private school to public school in high school. And so then in high school, maintained that smorgasbord of heritage, of skin tone, of it, and then also class and intellect.
Yeah.
And that is true. And then in college, it went all back to I remember I was trying to figure out differential equations, which was very difficult. And my friend Ron, hello, Ron Hira, you might see him on CNN sometimes, was trying to explain them to me. And I believe Ron got his first PhD at 21. He was one of those like really super.
Really, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like looking at the differential equation, not getting it. And Ron looked at it, and for him, it was 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
And for me,
right,
it was like Einstein figuring out, but not able to. Like I could not comprehend.
Yeah.
So my giftedness is more language, more, you know, and less math. And Ron was like, oh, well, of course, and blah, 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 and this, that. And I was just like, what?
Well, that's the thing too.
But then what I was saying about like the whole like privilege of the gift is Carnegie Mellon is the top 2%.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And I think the other thing is too, is that people forget among gifted people that when people think of gifted, they think of science, technology, engineering, and medicine. They think it's STEM, and what they don't realize is that there's just as many of us, possibly more, in the arts and humanities. The other thing that's a trouble that I find in this research of gifted people, particularly gifted adults, is that they measure success by, I hate to say it this way, but neurotypical measures. So have you won awards? Are you at the top of your field? How much money do you make? And the reality is that success is actually not defined that way. I am a housewife.
I want to be a housewife.
Right? Like, I mean, if you really like strip everything away,
yeah.
And a lot of the gifted women who I know that's what they do. And they do it extremely well. And we also do a lot of volunteer work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us are doing volunteer work that is a lot of work that requires a lot of meeting diverse people. A lot of it's advocacy work. The Lesha League, working in one of the things that I did is I helped a friend who said, oh, we're doing things to help the lawyers who will be supporting the protesters. And we wanted to send out, like, each state has different laws and so on. So can we do these things and just put out a call to people to write and research that? And I said, yeah, I'll do it, because time zones in New Zealand versus the US, great. I have a law degree, so I can use it. So, we do things that are intellectual, that are challenging, but I'm not the top of my field. I'm not making any money off of it. And yet in the studies, we would not be studied. We would not be studied as gifted people who have fulfilling lives and emotional stability and positivity. And part of the reason why, we have chosen to be housewives is not necessarily a choice. Oftentimes it's like, this is the gender construction and the way the world is constructed, such that when your child can no longer go to school because school is not willing to provide a baseline adequate education, you give up your career to take care of what needs to be taken care of. And women are often sacrificed on that altar. So it's a really fascinating thing, but that doesn't mean that we're not gifted. It doesn't mean we're not successful. It doesn't mean that we're not happy. It just means that we're not measured in the studies, which is really fascinating, because the study I read about 3 weeks ago was like, there are just as many successful gifted people in the humanities as there are in the sciences. And I'm like, well, no shit. And then it also was like, this is how success is defined.
It's interesting about that. I was, the first time I moved back to Pittsburgh after leaving, I was speaking with a longtime mentor of mine about the possibility of presenting at Chatham College. Mm. And she said, well, that's usually people who are successful do that. She's no longer my mentor.
Yeah, because the success measure
is they've made a lot of money.
Right.
And I have spent a lot of money the last couple of years because of life.
All this stuff.
Yeah. And so I'm in a, regrouping space around that at a bizarre time. Mm. And my ability to navigate all of this is an indication of success.
Absolutely.
And that success is rooted in high emotional intelligence, high intellect, deep somatic awareness, and
psychomotor,
all of this, all of the work I've done, and like all the other, like I knew when COVID hit what would happen to supply chains.
We were watching
because I have modeled logistics for companies that work on a 2% margin.
Yeah, right. Success. And that's the other thing. Like, I was
that's why when you came to my kitchen, I was like, I have 23 cans of ethically sourced anchovies that I don't know how to eat because
we'll melt them into sauces that you want, but I won't. But but that's exactly right. And I think that's the same thing. Like in my world, I was doing a map of the disease vectors and our most vulnerable people in our homeschooling population. Who are the people with autoimmune? Who are the people who are who would be at most and highest risk? And so here I am doing basically a risk assessment on disease vectors, and how do we protect the most vulnerable people of our community? And then beginning of February, a month before anybody else was even thinking about it in New Zealand, I went to some of my friends in the homeschooling community. I said, hey, I've been working on these disease vectors. They're like, oh, we're not worried about that. And then a month later, they're like, holy shit, we need to figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Just slide that paper over there. And then they did, they figured it out in a week. It was fantastic.
But you
it
do,
was like,
I'm so happy to hear you reflect that, because I figured out cell phones when I was like 6.
right. Like you knew it was coming.
No, I thought my phone number followed me everywhere to every phone.
Right. Right.
So
if that was yours.
That's my number.
Right.
That's a phone.
As opposed to a line. Yeah. And now.
And then the people are like, oh, Katie. But, I'm 6, so whatever.
Right.
And also, so there's a lot of like right now, especially with how do I ethically monetize having cancer?
Yeah.
Because I'm in that questioning space.
And that's the other thing. Gifted people are ridiculously ethical to the point of being very uncomfortable to anyone not neurodivergent.
And this is what is.
Right.
And so, and I need to earn a living because my time is up for resolving some stuff that happened last year.
Yeah.
So how do I do that ethically? And being like sitting and, okay, I'm ahead of a curve and I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And doing it anyway.
Yeah, that's hard. Going blind is hard on a gifted person.
How do I get an A? Who grades me?
Yeah, I know.
And I don't mean that lightly.
No,
I mean it like,
understand.
it's like, and so like emotional maturity, yes, but a deep immaturity in other ways, because I can't speak to your experience, my experience of, oh, she's so smart, oh, she's gifted or whatever, has centered me being the star, me being, and so now like this is going to change and this is going to change and
that's
COVID's transforming. I'm not going to have hair on my nose. I'm not going to have a breast and I have all these tools. Right. And so like, if I like divide, it just doesn't feel ethical for me to say, and like, here's Katie's cancer process and you just like follow my process. But it does feel ethical for me to say, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, I'm using the Taoist inner landscape to manage my emotional responses and to tone my vagal nerve.
Right.
With weird hair. And then how do I ask for money? Because everybody should know this.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is it's almost like memoir.
Oh, okay. We'll do a little memoir.
Like, I think memoir would be a great way to do it because people love personal stories. I mean, how many Korean housewives am I watching on
many
YouTube
Korean
right now?
Housewives? They're very lovely.
They're really lovely videos. I like the stylized nature. And I'm quite inspired by how they do it, how they do their videos.
I think you want to be a Korean housewife when you grow up.
I really like Korean things. It's fascinating. But it's
maybe you were Korean in a past life.
I don't know. When Hawk was born, I watched a lot of Korean soap operas while breastfeeding. So it's a thing. But it's fascinating in the sense that one of the things that sort of as a yoga teacher and in my branding or whatever, which has to be ethical, is that like the yoga is not about me, right? Yoga is a thing that existed before me. It will exist after me. I may not have a completely accurate read on what yoga is. I don't think, I have some ideas about things, but like, I don't consider it mine. It's simply like a thing that I'm in the flow of, it's a timeless river and I'm just in it. And
how many times have you heard you're wasting your gifts on this path?
Oh, fuck, man. Oh my God. Yeah. And there's a whole lot of like, you'll get bored with that because you'll get bored and you don't want to go that way. That won't make you successstephen. Those are huge things.
Boredom. So
boredom.
Yeah. Boredom. The Stephen P. Liggett. I am going to name you. He is my former brother-in-law. and was an amazing mentor to
Uh-huh.
me when I first started teaching asana.
Yeah.
And I then shifted into this logistics
Yeah.
role.
Logistics is cool.
Logistics is super cool. It's measurable
Oh my gosh.
and complex.
And you can find bottlenecks and make efficiencies.
And it was super fun. And I was doing business process engineering
Right.
and
That's
engineering.
Hot. That's hot.
And like
did you have to wear
education
pants
stuff.
while you did it?
I did.
Oh, Jesus. See,
But
that's the problem.
They were comfy pants.
Oh, okay.
But so Stephen gives me this glowing recommendation and says to the VP I'm going to be working with, your one problem, the one problem you're going to have is she's going to get bored.
And then you know what happens is you end up going full Loki.
My first day, Rich, awesome, wonderful, said this is what they said, and this was the warning. How do we keep you engaged?
Yeah.
Thank you. And also, wow, that's the problem. And I get bored and then I go on.
Yeah.
And then people think I don't complete, but I'm like, no, I figured it out. And this is why I'm going to need to figure out how to generate income while I have cancer.
I think you'll get there. And I think that's the thing too about gifted people. And it's particularly if you're out there now not watching this, no watching it, whatever. But if we're there,
because we're doing it in a way people can leave comments, so we're learning.
It's fine. And so we're looking at. So anyway, if you have a gifted kid or a gifted adult living with you who may be an undiagnosed gifted adult, there will be three things that they do. They will. What you feel is they'll jump ship too early. They won't complete, or they will go what I call full Loki, which is they just start mischief so they can solve problems. Loki, by the way, was probably an indigenous man who watched the genocide of his people and had a massive trauma. But we can talk about that on another show. And then the third thing that will often happen is that they might even just sort of spin and spin and spin and spin and spin and like almost fixate on the activity.
Sense.
Because they're and the other thing that happens is that a lot of us will sit there like this, like here's the information. And it takes us many years, like myself, I think I was like 43. I turned 44
now.
When I learned that like you can just accept that other people's processing speed and time at which they get information is not the same timeline as yours.
But what if they're wrong?
You have to let them be wrong for a long time, and you have to just go and have tea with Hel and Loki and like stir the big cauldron for her while you're waiting for people to catch up. And that is really, really hard, because then what happens is that a gifted child in particular will pressure you. Pressure. And I've done that up until I was 43. Pressure you to learn.
I'm just laughing because it's now.
But it's true. It pressure you to learn the thing now. Why are you so slow? It's making me crazy. So I will either abandon you or go full Loki.
I abandon.
Yeah.
I abandon if it's around my morals and values. And I feel protection towards people, like actual people, not ideas.
Yeah.
I abandon. And I abandon, I don't know if this is a gifted thing, this could be a Katie thing. I abandon and I grieve as though that person is dead.
Yeah.
And not dead to me like, fuck you. Just like, okay, that's done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and this might go to as well, like attachment theory stuff.
Oh, no. Yeah, we
can
talk about attachment theory.
This is how gifted people go, though.
My mother said I used to speak in, she used to say, I do, speak in footnotes.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like here, and then remember that thing? And then I read that article, and there was that art piece and the thing, and David did, my brother wrote this poem once when we were a kid, and do you remember what Hope did in 5th grade? And then I get back, or I'll start like 5 paragraphs in.
Yeah.
And like,
because that's where your mind is.
Say the thing.
Right.
It's, you know what? It's like, chess, strategy games.
I'm good at
And,
strategy.
but I'll start like 5 paragraphs in and say the thing, and people are like, what? Where'd that come out of?
Yeah,
Left
it's like
field.
left field.
And
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, what? Oh, that's right. People can't read my mind.
Yeah, your mind can't be read.
And a lot of my work,
Mhm.
because the intellect is so strong,
Yeah.
is to slow this down.
Right.
So I actually can have the feeling.
Yes.
The body.
That's the other thing, is that as a child too, like in school and everything, what's prized is your intellect. Your intellect is prized, and the academic situation prizes the intellect. And my friend Sarah's working on Seedling to get yoga into schools so that children can develop EQ, so that they can develop that psychosomatic awareness as children, because that's the thing. Like I know for myself. Yeah, but I know for myself, I'm in the same boat of like, I'll go to the intellect before I go to the
EQ guy's wife. Tangent.
Yeah, there's always a tangent.
No, and it was within the context of trauma or attachment theory.
Yeah.
The attachment theory, one of the attachment theory women, cognitive scientists, I believe, is married to the EQ guy.
I think one of, maybe. Yeah.
EQ guy wife? Is Google smart enough?
No.
But I do remember reading when, within the context of Bessel van der Kolk's International Trauma Conference, and because you brought up the attachment theory, and yes, that there's a cognitive science piece and the EQ piece, and it is a husband and wife research
conglomerate.
Oh, wait, no, it was the thing that I was asking you about.
The thing with the thing?
About whether somebody had already trademarked it or the book title.
Oh, right. Yeah. We found that one title.
What was the title?
I don't remember. Okay. But I remember we found the one title and then we're like, oh, look, that's the
But how long ago was it?
Yeah.
Is it trademarked? Right. Like all these questions before claiming the name. And I guess I didn't claim the name because I don't remember it.
But it's a fascinating thing about that how we respond. And that's the thing too that's really interesting is that that the gifted experience in childhood and young adulthood could actually impact how the attachment functions.
Yes.
So we are we back away. So which means we have the high self-esteem and the low social esteem, which means we don't really think that people in the world are going to support us. And then the opposite of that is where you have the lower self-esteem and the higher social esteem. So you're sort of chasing the acceptance. And
both of which present opportunities and cost.
Yeah, in both kinds. And then there's the disorganized, which is basically low self-esteem, low social esteem. So
and I wonder if that race, class, gender factor comes into the low self-esteem, low social esteem piece, where a family might recognize and see and literally be in a context where they're not able to provide.
Yeah.
Because we do not, socially,
because it's a social thing,
value people with skin color that isn't white.
Yeah.
Or
white supremacy.
We as a society in this country import them in, right? From India, from parts of Asia, from China, from Japan.
Previously literally trafficked them.
Yeah. But heaven forbid, Pittsburgh, we
confront it.
Oh, and we're one of the most racist cities in the country for the experience of people with brown and black skin.
Yeah, my friend Tracy, who lives here and is an actress, she talks about that quite a bit. And I'm always impressed with what she brings to the table because she's just bringing the goods.
Which is why I'm like, shut up, step back. You don't say you're going to lift the voice. You just get out of the way. And that's where I'm dropping. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. But well, you know what? You're also dealing with your breast.
What? My breast has nothing to do with this.
With dropping things?
Cancer
your dominant hand
Cancer has nothing to do with this.
Your dominant hand is struggling and you keep dropping things at the metaphysical level? Who knows? Who knows?
And like this ear is unhappy. It's this knee.
Yeah.
It's this hip. It's like, and then this is the patrilineal line.
Yeah.
So like, what is the patrilineal? Like the generations of trauma of, you know, because we're Sephardic Jews and gypsies.
Yeah. Okay. So also
no generational trauma there.
With generational trauma.
Yeah. And,
and the cool thing is that like all these opportunities that present, like, you know, my son presented me with an opportunity, like it literally felt like a fork in the road of like, do I put my child through what generations have gone through
and what you went through,
what I went through, or do I say we're going to go a different tack, we're going to go a different direction, and we went a different direction, and it was hard, and
but
it is hard,
doing so,
but he's so amazing, and he's worth it. He's doing
great,
and also like this is what
and you have the.
And it'll heal that way because that's how.
But you also
heals back.
You also have the resources to be able to take the time because you have the husband.
I do. I have the privilege.
Who went to the Carnegie Mellon?
He did, and he did the same degree. And he's super smart, and he's also excellent.
And he's actually working in his field, unlike the Katie.
Yeah,
but
but I think the thing that's really compelling about that is
your kid is.
Right. But that's the thing. When I went to the Ministry of Education and we made the complaint to the Ministry of Education in New Zealand, you know, the thing that I said is like, let us not forget that the reason I can do this is privilege.
Yeah.
The reason I can do this is because my husband has a stable, well-paying job. The reason I can do this is financial inheritance from his grandmother. The reason I can do this, so that's generational wealth. The reason I can do this is because I am educated and capable, and I'm not worried about food, shelter, clean water, medical care, because it's universal care. I'm not worried about these things. And it didn't come home to the women who were sitting with me and they go, oh, yeah. It didn't come home until because I could see it wasn't landing, until like several meetings through. And I said, if someone were to ask you tomorrow, because I knew the woman that I was talking to was a mom, she's an amazing woman, loves her job. She wants to make schools in New Zealand the best schools in the world for kids. That's what she wants. And I see that calling within her. I see it the whole time we're talking. And I said to her, tomorrow a school tells you your kid doesn't belong here, and the only option available to you is homeschooling. Can you do it? Would you do it? And she like sat back and was like, I would, but that means I'm losing my calling and my income that supports my kids. And I said, so let's presume then that you're single. I said, I don't know if you are, but let's presume that you're single. And now you're choosing, do I put my kids in an unsafe school, potentially unsafe environment, or poverty? What do I choose? Because you lose your job, you lose your income because you have to homeschool. I was like, that is what the school asked us to do.
Your family. They
asked our family to sacrifice a woman for their incompetence and their lack of accountability.
And you are the woman.
And I am the woman that was sacrificed. My calling was sacrificed.
Yeah.
And my calling was I ran my yoga studio and I had big visions and hopes for myself and the people that I supported through that studio. Now I get to teach online, which has been a real revelation. Thank you to all my amazing students and supporters who have followed us on this weird pathway. That you always walk with me into the weird. I thank you for that. But it was that, and it was good timing because the lease was up and all that other stuff. It was fine. And again, it's only fine because I have privilege, financial privilege. That's class privilege. My son has class privilege and race privilege and sex privilege, and he knows that. He's 12. He's 12, and he can say, this is my privilege. And because that's what we teach him. And so when I said that, it like all of a sudden she just realized like, oh shit, this is actually a big problem. And I'm like, this isn't just about me wanting to vent and be a hysterical mother about the school. This is me saying,
yeah,
it's not just this school. This is the problem. And that was, I think, a really compelling moment for me, and I think even for her. was what that was, because it was like, wow. And then I started to see the articles coming out from the Ministry of Education of like, we're doing more training for gifted education. We're doing more funding for gifted education. We're doing more support for restorative justice in the school environment rather than punitive models.
That would be lovely in America.
And yeah, I mean, like New Zealand's doing so much right. I can't say, you know, they do so much right, but there are everywhere. Problems are everywhere. You know, there's racism and sexism and
families
classism
like,
there.
oh, we don't want to live in that neighborhood because of the school district, and because, you know, the wealthy school districts get orders of magnitude more funding.
We have that in New Zealand more or less.
Orders of magnitude more funding than school districts that lack wealth.
Yeah.
And there doesn't seem to be an awareness that this could be actually part of the disparity in wealth.
Yeah. There is awareness of that in New Zealand, thankfully.
I don't know if I think there's probably awareness in the States, but
well, there's natural segregation. You know, there's a whole lot on that. But like, that's a whole other, see, this is a tangent that gifted people go on. And this is also why we do like for like all day long.
You and I.
No, but not just you and I.
I know.
Any gifted person I talk to. Like the thing is when Ryan and I get to the point where we're facing death, I will, if I, you know, if either one of us goes first, we'll be upset with the other one because we were not done with the conversation. I'm like, that's the hardest thing that, you know, it's like at the end of the day, when either I or Ryan falls asleep on the other, I literally get mad if he falls asleep on me. And I'm like, I was not done with the conversation. Right. Like, cause we're at 51 minutes. That didn't feel like 51 minutes to me.
Well, that's what I was going to say when you said we just go blah, 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 is like you and I will be like, oh, let's have some tea. Yeah. And it has to be near the kitchen because at some point a meal will have to occur because it'll be like 5 hours.
Luckily, the apartment is rather small. So it's not
I just go, you've seen the zone, you know. Y'all still haven't seen my little nest, my bed nest. Never gonna.
You gotta have some private spaces.
That's for me, and if I ever invite somebody into my bed again,
that's up to you. That's your business.
Don't we love Tabitha?
Tabitha's so great.
I introduced her as Tabitha Brown.
Yeah.
All right. So being gifted, tea stream.
Yeah.
With decaf tea.
The only thing
see how excited we are? Yeah. And we're not excited like happy. It's like
this is overexcitability.
And so
it's
now
in my body. My body is tingling with joy.
Now must regulate though. Now must regulate.
Yeah, well, I'll probably pee first.
Okay.
That helps.
And on that note,
peace, love, and ice cream, y'all.
Peace, love, and non-dairy ice cream.
We've got 2 flavors.
Chocolate and vanilla. Oh, we didn't put it in the tea.
No, we didn't.
We have to make more tea.
Time. We pee, we make tea.
We pee and we tea. Bye.
Bye, everyone.